This is the Mind Body Detox Podcast, where we discuss all things integrative health and wellness, interviewing folks from all over the world, sharing insights and wisdom for how to live a healthier life in mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. I'm your host, Mind Body Medium Kara Lovehart. I'm very excited to bring on Dr. Tony Reigle today, and we're going to talk about psychedelics and specifically ketamine-based therapy. And we're going to talk about what it is and what is the benefits of it, how does it work. So Dr. Tony is a Harrisburg native. He is a military veteran and a licensed professional counselor with a doctorate in psychology. He has over a decade of service in the Air Force and the National Guard, including combat time in Iraq. Dr. Reigle brings a deep understanding of trauma and resilience to his work. So he's trained in ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, prolonged exposure therapy, and neurolinguistic programming. He specializes in trauma, first responder mental health, and disruptive event management. He also teaches future therapists as an adjunct professor and volunteers his time supporting frontline workers and emergency teams. So we're going to tune into a powerful conversation on ketamine-based psychotherapy. Hi, Dr. Tony. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for inviting me and for the great introduction. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So let's just dive into this topic. Let's give us a simple breakdown of what exactly ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is, and then we can talk about what ketamine actually is.
Yeah, so ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is an assistive tool that is in conjunction with or integrated along with an array of standard modalities that people may have already experienced or may have sought. And it just kind of bolsters some of the effectiveness and some of the opportunities that we can gain from some of these other things. And so it consists of a medication piece, and there's a variety of different ways that ketamine can be administered. But that kind of starts the process. And then we have the opportunity very shortly after that to incorporate some integration therapy. And again, that could be your standard prolonged exposure, EMDR, internal family system, CBT, a lot of studies that are showing how they work collaboratively.
Well, then let's talk about what ketamine actually is. What does that molecule do to the body, and how does that differ from other psychedelic-assisted therapies, like psilocybin or MDMA?
Yeah, as I continue myself to learn more of the specifics and the mechanisms of some of the other medicines that are coming, my studies so far have been really into the neuroscience behind ketamine itself. So I don't have an incredibly deep expert, this is the definitive thing. We do know that there's a lot of similarities between the different medicines and how they're working in our brain and promoting neuroplasticity and the various neurotransmitters. But that's really where right now ketamine is shining. It was originally came to the market as a PCP derivative. It was just a safer, less side effect anesthetic back in the 70s. Made its way onto the battlefield in Vietnam because it was a safer battlefield medicine in which it doesn't require as much medical monitoring. So it actually has a high safety profile compared to some of the other anesthesias. It doesn't suppress respiratory. It doesn't increase your heart rate. So they could give it to downed soldiers and they could move on to help other folks. It made its way into the recreational world like most do in the 80s and kind of became a party drug for a long period of time. Its misnomer as a horse tranquilizer was because in that recreational period, it was easier to get out of vet clinics than it was out of hospitals. So most of the ketamine that was making its way onto the streets in the party scene happened to have animal or horse on it. And that's a misnomer. It's not it is, but that's not originally why ketamine kind of came to the market. It just happened to be what was on the streets. It was included on the WHO or the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. And it has been on there for quite some time. And then, within the last 5 to 10 years, we've been seeing a tremendous increase in studies around ketamine in many different things, chronic pain, migraines. They're looking at Alzheimer's, right? And now we obviously have it in mental health. So it's a pretty versatile medicine that is able to do a lot of fantastic things. In the medical or the mental health field, it really is how it works on some transmitters in our brain that allows us to um, kind of quiet down some old thinking patterns that have become disruptive or have held us back, while at the same time encouraging and promoting the ability to create and grow new ways of thinking or new neural pathways. And it is the exchange between quieting and loosening the grip of old thinking and strengthening more uh, helpful thinking patterns that really is what aids or how ketamine aids these very standard modalities that have been around for quite some time.
Now, for like conditions like depression, PTSD, and anxiety, for someone who's not a mental health professional, can you explain maybe some examples of how this disrupting stuck pattern or this thinking pattern, what it would look like showing up for someone who has those diagnoses or conditions?
Yeah, and each carries with its own kind of thing, and so we know that very quickly the properties of the medicine itself has a pretty quick and robust ability to reduce feelings or sensations or symptoms related to anxiety and depression. So we get that pretty quickly, which is a very favorable reason why ketamine can be effective in some regards. But again, it's the way it operates on our neurotransmitters. It's the way that it kind of blocks, the NMDA. It just happens to be one of the receptors, and it kind of quiets down. It kind of shuts down, closes that door, and allows glutamate that really promotes. Which has its own very robust antidepressant feature. Glutamate is very heavily involved in that process. And as it's able to surge that and allow it to not go into this receptor but go into another, kind of builds up some of those levels in our body. And it is through those things that are building and branching and strengthening our neural connections that helps us combat some of that anxiety and depression. It is what standard pharmacology is attempting to do. So our
Mhm.
SSRIs and a variety of other medications are attempting to do similar things. It just takes a little bit longer, right? 4, 6, 8. It takes a lot of figuring out and changing the right medications. So we're not necessarily saying it's brand new science, but it definitely is able to speed up that process a little bit, and it definitely speaks to other things. And one of those other things is this: the medicine also grows a fertilizer in our brain. If there's a lack of a better way, it's best way of understanding it. It's a protein, BDNF, and BDNF really promotes and grows and is really involved in the maintenance of our neural connections. So we have a bunch of things happening at one time. We have a quieting of some of the default habitual thinking that views the world through the lenses of depression, through the lenses of anxiety, through the lens of trauma. It quiets that down, that default circuitry, and then it opens up a window of neuroplasticity, the way that it works on these neurotransmitters to increase the communication, the building, the strengthening of neural connections. And when we do that in conjunction with integration and integrative therapy, we essentially can train ourselves to think differently. And when we do that enough, and those become strong enough, they kind of become our new default circuitry, and we're able to shift that. So the way I tell clients to make sure no one feels hopeless is that the pretty standard ways we've been doing things for a while have been kind of, if I gave you a block of granite and I said, chisel your Michelangelo or your David or the Statue of Liberty, whatever. I mean, there's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful masterpieces out there chiseled from hard granite. Ketamine, it might be like some of the things that we're doing with psychedelic assisted therapy, still hard work, but it might be giving a block of clay and it's a little bit more malleable and ask you to make the same masterpiece. Um, and that's kind of what the assistive tool is, that is psychedelic medicine.
I love that analogy. Getting into that neuroplastic state, and you're able to, somewhat calm. You said the default mode network, is it the default thinking?
The DMN,
And
yeah, the default mode
yeah,
network, yeah.
the intrusive thinking, obsessive thinking, like the part of the system that's in trauma response trying to protect you, in what it's doing, but it's calming it down so you can create these new brain patterns. And I think that's really interesting because, like, we could do like weekly or even biweekly, like extreme counseling sessions, 1 hour. This can be years of people's lives. And, let's talk about the difference and what happens typically in a ketamine assisted psychotherapy session, how it's structured, how long it works, what are the role the therapist plays, and how that differs from, maybe potentially shrinking the time to see some changes in people.
Yeah, I mean, it's really remarkable. One of the things that I've really, it's kind of a double-edged sword, but there's definitely a lot of benefit to how flexible and adaptable ketamine or all the psychedelic medicines are. And so, there's some freedom, and there's some really effective, there's some real benefits to really answering that question with showing up and providing what the client needs, right? So some of the structure, some of the role of the therapist, um, the manner, or the manner in which it's given, the frequency, a lot of that really is driven by client need and intentions versus a prescribed way, which is what we see with some standard approaches or some historical approaches with pharmacology and some therapies. You will do it this often, this many hours, this time, this many times a week, and that can be effective for some people, but some variations may be necessary as well. And so in some of our models, like the IV or the intravenous, some of those folks are getting those 2 to 3 times a week. Some of the folks that we have in our clinic that use the sublingual, it's kind of a foundation to do it once, one dosing session a week with one integrative therapy. But I've had clients that have found it to be so powerful, that they've asked to have a little bit more time between doses to really be able to process and reflect it, but on it and see. So I have clients that it's every other week or maybe once a month, because it's less about the medicine and it's more about the experience that it opens. And so we're not so hard pressed on, you have to do this so many times. It's, let's get you where you want to be. And in that space, that's what we're gaining. And if you can stay in that space for 3 weeks, then there's some argument to be had that we don't need to continue to give you medicine, because that's not the intention, right? And so there's some flexibility, but your standard kind of session, depending on what you get, right, is you're meeting with the doctor and you're gonna have your standard psych eval and make sure that you're safe, and you can go through some things. There are some things that are kind of indicated, but that's more of a conversation. IV, you're going to be with a medical professional that does require a higher level of monitoring. So you're typically going to be with a physician or at least a nurse that's trained in being able to administer the medicine. Um, in those kind of sessions, again, we would hope that you're being paired with very quickly after. Some models and some clinics I've seen that they stay and they provide therapy within the same day. And that could be a long day. Some of your IVs, most of your IVs are about 2.5 hours, to really make sure that you're safely moving through that. And so then if you ever have therapy in conjunction with that, that could be difficult. For some, they like that because it's in the same day versus having to come back the next day or the day after. Sublingual is self-administered. It's very safe to be given self-administered. And so we see some variations that you can be in the clinic with a guide, a chaperone, someone that's just checking in with you. It could be with a full-blown therapist that's really more active and helping you through that. And those can vary between 2.5 hours, 3, upwards of 4, depending on the dosing. And it's just a different way your body processes it than it would with the IV. And again, that's already quite substantial for our clients in our clinic. We just ask that they come back another day. So we really allow them to just really lean all in on the journey itself for one day and just kind of respect the journey, and then allow therapy to be the next day or the day after. We typically say that window of neuroplasticity is about 72 hours. And so we ask that the clients have to have a session within a day or two following the dose to really make sure we're optimizing it. The nasal, again, you're going to have somebody with you that unfortunately will have to be with you. Not unfortunately, it's fine, but they'll have to be with you to administer it because it's just administered in a different way. So it varies a little bit, but a really good program is going to include the medicine, and it's going to include an active role of a therapist that's trained in understanding the medicine and understanding how to integrate these altered states of consciousness with the goals that we're trying to achieve in what is empirically supported um, therapy models.
Yeah, and I will just speak to this, Dr. Tony. One of the things that I find any therapist or clinician or doctor or provider of any sort that actually has been through their own journey and has worked through it is so much more, in my opinion, qualified to administer, to support, and to guide. And so that's why I just want to just shout out to you because of your journey. And that's something that I find we place a lot of trust in you. And that's why we, of course, have you on our medical board for the Psychedelic Society. And I think that's important to just share that that's one of the things we are about: harm reduction education for the organization. And it's important to, so if you have any questions too, I feel like people can go to you if they have any questions about someone, maybe that's a provider in their area, or we're going to have some literature out there of like how to choose, a ketamine provider or a psychedelic assisted therapist. I think that's really important since this is the wild, wild west now, as far as, what the regulations and things like that are. So I kind of go into that, why is ketamine currently the only legal option for psychedelic assisted therapy, and what's, the growing interest and why?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really tough question. And we know that ketamine as a chemical compound has had FDA approval since the 70s. And that's really why it's the one that's the most mainstream right now, because the actual medicine itself has been FDA approved. And so, with that being said, I mean, it is important for individuals to know that there is a form of ketamine that has been approved for treatment resistant depression. And Spravato is the brand name of the nasal spray. So that it has gained FDA approval for use in mental health for treatment resistant depression. So it is just for TRD. And because of that, right, there some cost is different. It could be funded and covered by insurances, but that's the only FDA approval that we have for ketamine and mental health. It is something that should be fully transparent in our informed consent process to our clients. So as clinicians, we need to make sure we commit to informing them it's an off-label use in any other form for mental health. It doesn't mean it's unsafe. It just kind of means that for all intents and purposes, right now the FDA has not come out and officially stated that these uses in other forms of administration are FDA approved for this use. But we have to also understand that a lot of our medications that are either A, being used right now, may all still be off use, or even the ones right now that do have FDA approval that are being prescribed for us in mental health, at one time or another, were not used for mental health. Many of them were blood pressure medications. I think trazodone is one of them. I think it was a failed blood pressure medication. They used it. They saw the benefits with sleep, and they did a whole bunch of studies, and now it's one of the a very common sleep aid. Um, I think there's a lot of them out there. Prozasin, which we use for nightmares for PTSD, that it too was either a blood pressure or something cardiovascular, right? So there's a lot of medications that when they come to market for one thing, people over years and years of its use start seeing that it's benefiting other populations. And those types of pioneers say, we need to look at that more and we need to do studies for that. And that's what's happening with ketamine. We've noticed that ketamine and other psychedelic medicine, but ketamine, since it's already being used in the medical field, has properties that deserve to be explored and studied. And they are. And there's a lot of people championing for additional FDA approval and additional access. So it's not illegal for clinics to use it off label with the correct amount of training. But it doesn't come with the FDA stamp of approval that through their metric, it meets their standards. But again, we can see this in a lot of things. There's probably a lot of people doing a lot of great foods and supplements that don't have FDA approval. It doesn't mean they're
Mhm.
not safe. It just means the FDA hasn't gotten involved in it. That's kind of what's happening with ketamine right now. So that's also why it's there. And unfortunately,
Mhm.
psilocybin, MDMA, and some of these other psychedelics haven't found their way mainstream in any form, any medical form that it could then be piggybacked off of in an off-label use. That's really why ketamine right now stands out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then let's talk a little bit about the common misconceptions about ketamine therapy, because that is something that people are like, wait a minute, what happened with Matthew Perry? Like, there's this whole thing that we had this like upheaval in the psychedelic space of what this means. And I think it's important because people then maybe be more likely to move away from it. So let's address those misconceptions and myths.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot, right? Again, the horse tranquilizer, and that's completely an unfortunate, connection between two things. Obviously, at high levels, it's absolutely an anesthetic. I mean, that's where it's got its value. Back when PCP was being used, people were having quite a bit of really powerful experiences. And so I don't know his name, and I probably should, but whoever experimented with it said, hey, this doesn't feel terrible and it doesn't have a ton of side effects either. So like, we could give this a consideration. So, right. So this misnomer that it's a party drug, or this misnomer that it's a horse tranquilizer, we got to let go of that. It is a medical medicine, and is it a medicine? It is a medical drug, for lack of a better word, in its generic form. That's how it started. It started for human beings, and it started as an anesthesia, an anesthetic with people in the medical, as well as soldiers on the battlefields. Like that. That's what this started as, and over time, it got its hands into the party scene, like most things. And I already addressed kind of why it got tagged as a horse or animal tranquilizers, because again, it was easier to steal or to, you know, accidentally take a vial home with you from the vet clinic than it was where hospitals track stuff like that much more strictly. So we have to let go of those misnomers, because that's not doing any service to a medicine that has been helping people in so many ways since the 60s and 70s. This has been around forever. So that's something. Another thing that we have to really recognize, and I think this is where, as you mentioned, the Wild Wild West, we have to be careful of. And I think we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot in some degree. Again, it's a double-edged sword. It's great to have freedom. It's great to be able to meet our clients and to feel that we can really tailor our programs. Unfortunately, that has opened the door for some people taking advantage of that. And so I think some of the things that have really put stigma around it, or have caused people to be nervous about it, is likely because not everybody is doing it safely. And I even mean professionals. Not all professionals are building safe programs. They're not all extensively trained in mental health. I'm not saying that they can't do good things if they got the right training. I'm just saying that we have to be careful that because we have the ability to prescribe, that we just say, well, we're going to do that for PTSD, and we don't have any training in mental health or trauma. So I do think that one of the things we're combating is that people that are reaching out for these services are having bad experiences, and then that's getting shared. And unfortunately, when bad experiences are compared to good experiences, our human brain tends to pick the bad experiences. And that's self-preservation. We want to look at the bad and say, I need to protect myself from that. And unfortunately, that's just bad policies and bad procedures. And there's a lot of unsafe clinics out there. So one of the things that makes this safe, like I said, the reason why it was used so heavily is it's one of the safest of all the anesthesias. You don't necessarily have to have a crash cart because it's not going to suppress your respiratory system. Especially at the very low end that we're using in the mental health field. But even then, right, it's safe in that regards. It doesn't mess with blood pressure. If anything, it does. It raises it a little bit. It doesn't tank it. So I think I may have misspoke earlier. It doesn't lower your blood pressure, so you don't have to worry about bottoming out, where you have to have a crash cart. So respiratory, your blood pressure, everything's kind of stable, which makes it very safe. Unfortunately, some of the stories, without specifically targeting anybody or talking badly about anybody, we have to read between the lines to get some of the information. We have to educate ourselves, right? That it wasn't the ketamine. Ketamine was a contributing factor only because of the sheer volume and amount of ketamine that was used. It didn't suppress respiratory system. It didn't cause an individual to stop breathing. Unfortunately, at the levels being used and at the frequency that was being used outside of a clinic, it's very important to recognize that some of the stories we've heard were not being done under the monitoring and the guidance of medical professionals. Unfortunately, in one of those cases, the actual medical professional said, no, you're not using it right. What you're asking is beyond what would be therapeutic. And so we're no longer going to prescribe that. So we had good medical professionals actually do the right thing. Again, unfortunately, at that level, now it becomes an anesthesia, they're on anesthesia at that point. And I hate to tell you, if you don't know that people are operating on you when you're under it, you're not going to know, unfortunately, that you're drowning in water or that something else is happening to you. So while ketamine was a factor, it was the amount of use of the chemical or the medicine outside of what it was to be used for that unfortunately contributed to that. So again, with all that being said, I talk to all my clients. A very good informed process talks about risks. It talks about some of these things, but a program that checks in with you regularly, a program that requires you to attend therapy, that doesn't give you a whole ton of supplies all at once, but asks that we break that up over a period of time with some check-ins with your doctor in between. All of those are good programs that are absolutely maximizing the safety of this treatment and the effectiveness of it too. It's a financial investment. And someone that just says, here, financially invest in this, take the medicine, feel great, they're not respecting your financial investment. The people that are saying, hey, come to therapy, do the work, let's do that together. And if you can stretch out when you take your doses, that's just going to further maximize like your potential that you can gain. So those clinics that ask you to check in more often and monitor you more often are respecting your emotional and financial investment by making sure that it's the best experience you can possibly have and you can experience those benefits for longer term.
Yeah, absolutely. Hands down. I think, but as we see more things progress, what do you see is for the future and for
It's
ketamine-based
exciting.
therapies? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't get lost. We're doing, there's a lot of studies going on. Sunny Stiles, but she's fantastic. She wrote a book, many books, right? And I took some a couple courses with her about ketamine and internal family systems, and she makes the same comment. That she hopes that, while some of these other advancements are happening and we don't lose sight of, right? It's not a using ketamine until something better comes along and then we replace that. I truly believe that each medicine is going to have its own. It has a potential to have its own place at the table if we allow it, right? If we are able to give access to multiple things. I don't think we have to compete between ketamine against psilocybin against MDMA, even if they have different results. I still think that just shows that the more we have available to us, the more able we're going to help people, because again, it's not just do this and this makes everything better. It's learning about our it's learning about people. It's hearing their story, and then from that saying we have some things based on that we can possibly help you. So we need access to more possibilities. So I hope that ketamine stays, we don't lose sight of it just because it's kind of already here. We kind of have some FDA approval. We're doing it
Yeah.
kind of with off label. I hope we don't lose sight that we still need to do studies and we still need to advocate for more widely available or access that's FDA approved, as we are also fighting for other medicines that could be doing similar things, but in their own right are doing different things, right? So I'm excited. Psilocybin, there's a lot of great momentum gaining. Some states are writing some legislation to at least get it talked about. It doesn't mean maybe it's going to be as widely accepted right now, but just the fact that some are saying, well, it's okay if it gets shot down, at least people know we're not going away. So I think that's a pretty cool advancement. There's some talks that there's a company that's already starting to synthesize it to make it more possible to see it. And MDMA, while it had some falters last year, because we were last year leading into this year, where we were kind of hopeful maybe we've already would have seen it. Hope isn't lost. That company's going back and doing their thing, but since then, the VA has earmarked $1.5 million to a 5-year study for MDMA and PTSD with veterans. The DoD just gave the University of Texas $5 million to study MDMA with active duty veterans at PTSD in conjunction with prolonged exposure. So the commitment and the money being invested in studies really shows some hope in those fields too. So we are, fingers crossed, still campaigning for access to some of these other medicines. And like I said, I'm going to certainly move with them as they come available. I hope ketamine doesn't get lost because it's really been helping a lot of folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Tried and true. Yeah. So we're going to be moving into ketamine-assisted psychotherapy for veterans, first responders, and high-need populations. So this is Dr. Tony's expertise and passion. And I just love talking to you because part of my soul and my spirit is like a protector. I'm here to protect. And so I have a special place in my heart for anyone out there that, anyone that is a warrior spirit, anyone that's been a first responder, someone that's here to protect, because there's so much being in that line of whether it's actual attack or being verbally, psychically attacked in this world where we're standing up and speaking out truth for things. We need tools to help the nervous system to downregulate, because there's a lot of things that happen from trauma, from these repetitive experiences that can really affect our mental health in our day-to-day. So thanks for listening, guys. Check out our next episode. And again, if you want to learn more about Dr. Tony, go into the show notes and check out Reigle Therapeutics. This is in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And check out the Central Pennsylvania Psychedelic Society. Dr. Tony is on our board. He is the Director of Veterans and First Responder Affairs. And you can always check us out and learn more about our organization. So thanks, everyone, for listening. Thank you for listening to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. If you love this podcast, share it with others and leave us a review. Your reviews help us more than you know and supports us continuing to make episodes and being heard from all over the world. You can also follow the link in our show notes to submit a topic that you would like to hear on the show.